"Evelyn, don't make a scene tonight," Lucas whispered as he adjusted his napkin, his voice low enough for only me to hear, but sharp with the expectation that I would obey. I smiled, placing my hands flat on the polished oak table, feeling the cool surface under my palms, and I didn't respond, letting the weight of the silence stretch between us. The dining room was lit by a soft chandelier glow that reflected off the crystal wine glasses, the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh herbs filling the air, yet it felt hollow, the laughter and casual chatter masking a subtle tension that only I seemed to notice. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, moved gracefully around the room, her smile effortless, handing out plates and pouring drinks as if nothing were wrong, yet the slight narrowing of her eyes whenever she glanced at me betrayed a careful calculation. I observed the way she lingered just a moment too long near Lucas when he reached for his wine, the way she adjusted the silverware with precision, and the way every gesture seemed choreographed to maintain an illusion of harmony while keeping me at the edge of discomfort. I remembered sitting at this very table years ago with my late husband, sharing meals with our children, the warmth of family surrounding us, and how now the same table, the same china, the same familiar dining room, had transformed into a stage where I was expected to play a role I did not choose. My mind traced back through countless dinners, holidays, and birthdays, moments when I had gone out of my way to ensure everyone felt included and celebrated, moments where my own wishes were quietly set aside for the happiness of others, and I realized the pattern, the subtle manipulations that had always been there but were now laid bare in Lucas's whispered admonition. As I took in the gleaming plates, the untouched bread rolls, and the careful placement of every utensil, I felt a simmering clarity settle over me. I understood that the real performance tonight was not the family gathering, but the invisible test of my compliance, and that my reaction, or lack thereof, was more powerful than any protest. I picked up my napkin, smoothing it gently across my lap, and let my eyes wander to the centerpieces, the candles flickering softly, reflecting the calm I projected on the outside, while every fiber of my being noted the subtle power plays, the alliances, and the silent strategies unfolding in plain sight. Every clink of a glass, every soft murmur of conversation, served to heighten my awareness, a gentle reminder that appearances could deceive and that patience and observation could wield their own quiet authority. I traced the contours of the silverware, inhaling the scent of rosemary and thyme, letting the familiar domestic rhythm ground me while simultaneously sharpening my attention to the nuances of the interactions around me, noticing the slight hesitation in Lucas's movements, the quick, deliberate adjustments of Victoria's posture, and the careful choreography of gestures meant to signal control. In that moment, I felt a cool detachment, an inner steadiness that came from knowing I had witnessed similar patterns before, that I had learned to see the truth hidden beneath the polite smiles and soft words, and I understood that this night, like many nights before, was less about what was said and more about who held influence and how it was subtly exerted, and I smiled again, not with amusement but with quiet certainty that I would navigate this evening on my own terms, observing, measuring, and preparing for the moment when the real power of calm action would reveal itself. The room settled into a quiet hum of conversation that never truly reached me, the chatter of polite greetings and laughter masking the subtle tensions that I had come to recognize long ago. I observed each gesture and glance, noting the way Victoria passed the breadbasket to Lucas with a slight tilt of her head, the carefully controlled arch of her eyebrows whenever she noticed me looking in her direction, and the soft inflection in her voice when she commented on the roasted vegetables, as if every word were measured to assert an unseen control. Lucas, though attempting to maintain an air of casualness, seemed tense in the way his shoulders tightened and his hands occasionally brushed against the edge of the table, betraying a hesitation he did not verbalize, a silent acknowledgement that the dynamics of the evening were under scrutiny. I allowed my eyes to drift over the meticulously arranged table, the gleam of silverware catching the light from the chandelier above, the polished surface reflecting the careful choreography of family roles that had been rehearsed countless times before. In these small moments, I recognized the patterns of behavior that had emerged over the years, subtle but deliberate, meant to shape perception and influence actions without confrontation, and I appreciated the clarity that came from watching without participating, the power of observation as a quiet, steady force. I recalled similar evenings from the past, dinners filled with laughter and stories, now replaced by a veneer of civility that barely concealed the undercurrents of manipulation, and I found a strange comfort in the contrast, the recognition that my experience and understanding gave me an advantage that no outward display could diminish. As the plates were filled and served, I maintained my composure, noting the careful timing of each interaction, the slight hesitations, the unspoken agreements, and the delicate balance of authority that seemed to hover between Lucas and Victoria, all while I sat poised, unremarkable in my actions yet acutely aware of every nuance. I allowed myself a slow, deliberate sip of water, the cool liquid grounding me as I observed a subtle exchange across the table, a minor comment, the flicker of an eye, a shift in posture, all elements that told a story in a language only those paying close attention could understand. The candlelight flickered against the crystal, casting shadows that moved gently across the tablecloth, and I noted how each shadow seemed to mimic the hidden intentions and subtle power plays at work, reminding me that appearances could be deceiving and that silence often held more weight than words. I traced the rim of my glass with my fingertip, letting the cool surface steady my thoughts as I catalogued every movement, every expression, committing them to memory, understanding that patience and calm could be the most potent responses, that my awareness alone provided a quiet authority that was impossible to dispute. In the background, the faint clatter of cutlery against plates punctuated the conversation, a reminder of the normalcy that others assumed was present, while in reality, every interaction was laden with significance, every smile a potential signal, every polite comment a test, and I embraced the stillness within me, knowing that the evening was a canvas on which the unspoken truths would slowly reveal themselves, and that my role was to remain observant, composed, and ready for the moment when action would be necessary, all while maintaining the appearance of ease and contentment. As the main course was served, Evelyn continued to observe the delicate choreography around her, noting the way Lucas lifted his fork with precision, the way Victoria poured the wine at just the right angle, and the subtle cues exchanged between them that conveyed understanding without words. Every movement seemed carefully measured, a silent agreement to maintain the appearance of an ideal family dinner, while undercurrents of tension ran beneath the surface. I allowed my attention to wander to the small details, the pattern of the placemats, the gentle sway of the chandelier crystals, the warm glow of the candle flames dancing across the polished wood, all grounding me in the physical reality of the moment while my mind catalogued the psychological landscape. I remembered times when the family had gathered for meals filled with laughter and genuine conversation, contrasts now stark against the carefully curated politeness that cloaked the room, and I appreciated the clarity that came from understanding the motives behind smiles and the subtleties in tone that betrayed hidden agendas. Victoria's comments were light and casual, but I recognized the strategic intent, the way she inserted praise for Lucas in measured doses, keeping the balance of attention focused away from me, and I noted it all silently, allowing the observations to accumulate. I sipped my water, the coolness a subtle reminder of my control over my own reactions, and watched the minor interactions, how Lucas's hand would linger slightly longer than necessary near Victoria's when reaching for the salad, how she would tilt her head as if correcting some imagined imperfection in the table setting, every movement a carefully considered contribution to the tableau of the evening. The soft background music, the subtle clinking of utensils, and the gentle murmur of conversations I was only partially a part of all became instruments through which the underlying dynamics of the family were expressed. I felt a growing awareness, a quiet power in observing without participating, understanding without confronting, and I allowed a faint smile to play across my lips, a signal only to myself that patience and attention were my allies. Each glance exchanged, each polite remark, each understated gesture of courtesy or subtle manipulation built a map in my mind, a landscape of intentions and unspoken rules that I could navigate without revealing my comprehension. I reminded myself of previous occasions where I had witnessed similar dynamics, where patience and careful observation had provided insight that direct confrontation could not, and I settled into the evening with a composed vigilance, noting everything, acknowledging nothing, yet understanding fully the currents beneath the smooth surface of conversation, the unseen structures of influence and control that dictated the flow of the dinner, and I embraced the quiet authority that came from knowing the full story while outwardly appearing to be a participant in a conventional family gathering. As the dessert plates were brought to the table, Evelyn allowed herself a subtle, controlled observation of the scene, noting the meticulous placement of each item, the gentle clinking of forks against china, and the way the soft light from the chandelier reflected in Lucas's eyes, revealing a hint of unease despite his composed demeanor. Victoria moved with practiced grace, a delicate nod here, a careful tilt of her head there, each gesture maintaining the polished appearance of a family in harmony while masking the underlying tension. Evelyn's mind traced back through the years, recalling the countless times she had prepared dinners, holidays, and celebrations with meticulous attention, her efforts always directed toward fostering warmth and connection, and now she saw the contrast, the transformation of these routines into performances that subtly excluded her from the true circle of decision and influence. She noticed Lucas's glance toward Victoria when she made a passing comment about the garden, the slight lift of his brow, and the careful modulation of his tone, all signaling the silent negotiations taking place beneath the surface. Evelyn sipped her tea, feeling the warmth settle into her hands, a reminder that her presence, her calm and steady demeanor, carried its own quiet authority even amidst the careful orchestration by others. The gentle hum of conversation around her, the soft laughter, the comments about the meal and the day's plans, all provided a soundtrack that masked the subtle contests of influence at work, yet Evelyn's awareness captured every nuance, each inflection and movement, cataloging them in her mind. She reflected on her late husband's guidance, the lessons of patience, observation, and strategic restraint, realizing how those teachings now allowed her to see clearly through the facades, to recognize the patterns of deference and control, and to measure her responses with precision. As she watched Victoria discreetly adjust a chair and Lucas lean slightly forward in acknowledgement, Evelyn felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that understanding and composure could command more power than any overt statement. The soft candlelight flickered across the tablecloth, highlighting the textures of the meal, the subtle sheen of silverware, and the faint reflection of Evelyn's composed expression, and in that moment, she recognized the potency of observation, of silent insight, of being present in body while her mind mapped the dynamics and intentions of those around her. She let a gentle, imperceptible smile touch her lips, a silent signal of her inner strength and clarity, fully aware that the unfolding evening, with all its apparent civility and understated tensions, was a landscape she navigated with deliberate calm, patience, and unwavering attention, each element contributing to the subtle shaping of outcomes that only she truly understood. Throughout the remainder of the dinner, Evelyn continued her quiet vigilance, letting the surface civility of the evening wash over her while her mind mapped every nuance of interaction at the table. Lucas spoke softly about his work and recent projects, his tone courteous but measured, and Evelyn noted how each comment seemed calculated to emphasize his own competence while minimizing her involvement, a subtle reminder of the shift in family dynamics. Victoria laughed lightly at appropriate intervals, her gestures precise, maintaining the rhythm of a family dinner that appeared ordinary to any casual observer but was laden with subtle manipulations she deployed with careful intent. Evelyn took a slow sip of her water, feeling the cool liquid anchor her in the present while her eyes scanned the room, taking in the way shadows moved across the walls, the gentle sway of the chandelier crystals, the glint of polished silverware, all reflections of the care and control exerted over the environment. She recalled past gatherings where warmth had flowed naturally, where conversations had been filled with laughter and spontaneous storytelling, and contrasted those memories with the current evening, recognizing the performance of controlled interactions and the careful maintenance of appearances. A small smile played at the corner of her lips, not of amusement but of quiet understanding, as she registered the subtle cues, the brief exchanges of glances, the nuanced timing of hand movements and pauses in speech, each a piece of a larger, intricate pattern of influence and restraint. Evelyn allowed herself to imagine the unspoken considerations behind each action, the motivations guiding each gesture and word, constructing a silent narrative that revealed the true power. Structures of the evening. She leaned back slightly, observing Lucas adjust his posture when Victoria offered a comment, the slight hesitation in his responses, the careful modulation of his tone to convey agreement without overcommitment, and she catalogued it all without disturbance to the rhythm of the dinner. In the background, soft music played and the ambient sounds of silverware and gentle conversation filled the room, masking the subtle interplay of influence, yet Evelyn absorbed every signal, noting intentions and unspoken expectations, the layers of strategy and pretense that unfolded around her. Her mind traced possible outcomes and responses, appreciating the advantage of patience and perception over overt confrontation, and she felt a steady confidence settle within her, a calm knowledge that her awareness and composure offered a quiet but undeniable authority. Each course passed with measured conversation and polite gestures, the facade of harmony intact, while beneath the surface, Evelyn silently monitored, assessed, and anticipated, ready to act in ways that would assert her presence and perspective without needing to disrupt the carefully maintained order, and she knew that her power lay in this controlled observation, the patience of watching and understanding the intricate dance of family interactions as they unfolded before her. As the final course was cleared from the table, Evelyn remained seated, her posture relaxed but her mind alert, noting the subtle shifts in conversation and posture around her. Lucas leaned back slightly, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass, and I observed the micro-expressions that flickered across his face, moments of uncertainty hidden behind carefully controlled manners. Victoria moved to collect the empty plates, her movements fluid and deliberate, and Evelyn noted the precise timing of each step, the slight tilt of her head, the pauses in her speech that ensured attention was drawn toward her orchestrated performance and away from any inconsistencies. I reflected quietly on my own preparation for the evening, the time spent arranging the table, selecting the meal, ensuring that every detail communicated warmth and care, and contrasted that with the subtle, calculated performances surrounding me, realizing that patience and observation could illuminate truths that overt confrontation never could. The soft lighting from the chandelier cast gentle shadows across the table, highlighting the reflections in crystal glasses and polished silverware, each glint a silent reminder of the careful equilibrium maintained throughout the dinner. Evelyn allowed herself a slow, deliberate sip of water, grounding herself in the present while her mind traced every exchange, every glance, and every word, connecting them into a coherent understanding of the underlying dynamics at play. She recalled similar gatherings in the past, the flow of conversation, the laughter, the spontaneous moments of connection that had defined the family in times of genuine warmth, and contrasted them with the calculated precision of the present evening, appreciating the clarity it offered her. Each smile, each polite comment, each seemingly casual gesture held a meaning that Evelyn catalogued carefully, understanding that control could be asserted not through loud declarations but through measured observation and strategic restraint. The quiet hum of background music and soft conversation became a canvas upon which the subtleties of influence, intention, and authority were painted in delicate strokes, and Evelyn absorbed it all, noting the patterns, predicting responses, and measuring the impacts of unspoken rules. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile, a silent acknowledgement of her growing comprehension and inner steadiness, recognizing that her calm, attentive presence carried more weight than any overt display of disagreement. As Victoria and Lucas continued their performance, Evelyn sat poised, aware of every nuance, every shift in energy, every silent communication that passed unnoticed by others, and in the quiet of her mind, she prepared for the moments ahead when her observations, patience, and measured responses would reveal the full extent of her understanding and subtly assert her influence without disturbing the apparent harmony of the evening. The conversation had reached a delicate rhythm, each movement around the table carrying more meaning than the words spoken. Evelyn observed as Lucas shifted slightly in his chair, the subtle adjustment betraying a tension he tried to hide, a quiet acknowledgement of the undercurrents that flowed between him and Victoria. She noticed the almost imperceptible way Victoria's fingers rested on the rim of her glass, how she tilted her head when responding to a comment, the carefully measured pauses that ensured all eyes remained focused on the narrative she curated. Evelyn's mind traced every gesture, mapping the intentions and reactions with precision, understanding that patience and observation were as much tools as any spoken word could be. She recalled earlier dinners when laughter and shared stories had defined the evening, the warmth of genuine connection contrasting sharply with the controlled performance unfolding now, highlighting the subtle strategies employed to maintain appearances. Each movement, each glance, each nuanced expression was noted, catalogued, and interpreted, allowing Evelyn to read the room with clarity that surpassed the superficial harmony projected by the participants. She took a deliberate sip of her water, feeling the cool liquid center her, giving her the composure to continue observing without distraction or interference. The soft glow of candlelight flickered across the table, illuminating the polished surfaces and reflecting the careful choreography of family interactions, and Evelyn noted how these visual cues mirrored the precision of the emotional and psychological currents at play. She allowed herself a faint, private smile, a recognition of the quiet power in understanding the subtleties of influence and intent without engaging in overt confrontation, appreciating the advantage of clarity and restraint over reaction. As Victoria excused herself briefly to attend to a minor task in the kitchen, Evelyn observed Lucas's body language, the brief hesitation before he continued speaking, the micro-expressions that revealed a recognition of the unspoken hierarchy, and she catalogued every detail silently, constructing a mental framework of the evening's dynamics. The soft background music, the gentle hum of conversation, the occasional clink of cutlery all served as the ambient soundtrack, masking the intricacy of the strategic exchanges occurring in plain sight, and Evelyn absorbed it all, letting each signal inform her understanding of the underlying structures. She noted how subtle changes in posture, gaze, and tone could shift influence and attention, and how patience and observation allowed her to anticipate actions and reactions without the need for verbal intervention. The awareness of control, subtle and measured, settled over her like a quiet cloak, providing a sense of confidence and readiness, knowing that she could navigate the remainder of the evening with insight and poise, while maintaining the appearance of calm participation, each observation strengthening her understanding of the intricate patterns of family interactions and the quiet but undeniable influence that careful attention could wield. As the evening drew toward its conclusion, Evelyn remained a silent observer, her senses attuned to every nuance of movement, gesture, and expression around the dining table. The final course had been cleared, leaving the polished oak surface gleaming under the soft chandelier light, and the gentle hum of conversation and occasional laughter continued to fill the room, a carefully maintained soundtrack that belied the subtle undercurrents she had tracked throughout the meal. She noted the slight shifts in Lucas's posture as he leaned back, the measured way Victoria placed the dessert plates on the sideboard, each action carefully choreographed to sustain the appearance of a harmonious gathering while maintaining control over attention and perception. Evelyn reflected on her own presence, her calm, deliberate movements and measured expressions serving as both shield and instrument, allowing her to observe without revealing the depth of her understanding, cataloging every small signal with precision. The soft glow of candlelight highlighted the textures of the tablecloth, the glimmer of polished silverware, and the gentle reflections in the crystal glasses, creating a visual rhythm that mirrored the underlying choreography of family dynamics. Evelyn took a slow sip of her tea, the warmth a grounding sensation as she noted the subtle pauses in conversation, the fleeting glances exchanged between Lucas and Victoria, and the carefully modulated tones of voice that revealed unspoken intentions. She recalled earlier dinners, celebrations, and family gatherings, where warmth and spontaneity had defined the moments, and contrasted them with the controlled elegance of the present evening, appreciating the clarity that came from understanding the silent structures of influence and expectation. Every small adjustment, every careful placement of an object, every slight hesitation in response, contributed to a map in her mind of the unspoken negotiations and strategies at play, allowing her to predict reactions and anticipate outcomes with a quiet confidence. Evelyn observed how the room seemed to settle around her calm presence, how the lighting, music, and arrangement of items worked in concert to frame the interactions she was witnessing, and she appreciated the subtle authority inherent in patience and attentive observation. The final moments of the evening passed with measured conversation and polite smiles, the appearance of civility maintained while Evelyn internalized every detail, every nuance, every unspoken exchange, understanding that her awareness and composure had quietly established her own presence and influence in a gathering orchestrated to test and measure her. In the stillness of the concluding meal, she allowed herself a private, controlled satisfaction, the knowledge that she had navigated the evening with insight, discretion, and quiet authority, fully aware that her role as observer and strategist had preserved her dignity and prepared her for the moments when her understanding would have the most meaningful impact, all while maintaining the appearance of composed participation in a family dinner that was more complex than any outward glance would suggest. As the last traces of dessert were cleared and the soft murmur of conversation began to settle into a comfortable quiet, Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap, observing the room with the careful attention that had guided her through the entire evening. The chandelier cast a warm glow across the polished surfaces, highlighting the careful placement of every utensil, the subtle sheen of the glassware, and the gentle reflections in the crystal, all contributing to an ambience that seemed ordinary at first glance but revealed layers of intention to those paying close attention. Lucas and Victoria spoke in hushed tones about upcoming events and minor household matters, their voices polite, yet each inflection and pause carried the weight of the unspoken dynamics Evelyn had been tracking all evening. She noticed how Lucas would glance toward Victoria before responding, the slight tilt of his head, the carefully measured pauses that suggested coordination and awareness of the underlying narrative, and how Victoria would tilt her glass or adjust a napkin in response, tiny gestures that conveyed subtle power and influence without overt confrontation. Evelyn reflected quietly on her own presence and demeanor, the steady calm she maintained allowing her to witness the interplay of control and persuasion without revealing the depth of her understanding, cataloging each small movement, glance, and inflection with precision. The soft flicker of candlelight created shifting patterns on the tablecloth, a visual echo of the delicate dance of attention, authority, and observation that unfolded around her. She allowed herself a slow, deliberate sip of tea, the warmth grounding her as she absorbed the subtle exchanges, the quiet negotiations, and the careful performances that marked each interaction, appreciating the clarity that came from seeing the full picture without interference. Memories of past family gatherings surfaced, times of genuine laughter, spontaneous conversations, and warm connection, and she compared those moments to the carefully controlled performance of the present evening, recognizing the depth of strategy and restraint involved. Every minor adjustment of posture, the faintest hesitation before a word was spoken, the controlled modulation of tone, all contributed to a map in Evelyn's mind, providing insight into the intentions, priorities, and vulnerabilities of those around her. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her patient observation, her calm presence, and her measured attention provided a subtle authority that needed no declaration, that allowed her to navigate the remainder of the evening with poise and understanding, fully aware of the dynamics at play and the silent influence she wielded, all while maintaining the outward appearance of composure and attentive participation, a silent strategist fully in command of her own perception and control over the unfolding narrative.